Travis Wayne Goodsell. I see the Mormon is on a shift this morning for YouTube, denying me my religious freedom rights. I do need to take out clips from the conference talks to put in videos for the future here. But nonetheless, when it comes to denying people religious freedom, we have Joseph Smith, who has denied his religious freedom. And there's a Deuteronomic law of Moses that covers this. And in chapter 18, it is prophesied of a man like Moses, who is to come in the latter days and warn people. And then it talks about a false prophet. And so 19, which you have to understand, this was one complete document. It was not divided into chapters and verses. And so they talk about the man like Moses, they talk about the false prophet during his time, and then they get into what to do with the punishment for a false witness. And as Joseph Smith was falsely accused and murdered, what is the punishment by God? In verse 16, if a false witness rise up against any man to testify against him that which is wrong, and it doesn't have to be an official court setting. This is just somebody coming up to you and making false accusation of you, going on YouTube, making false accusations, pulpit of conference, sending death threats. And then the next conference saying, "Oh, you can't hurt me, you gotta forgive me." Son of a bitch. I need to take those segments out. He used Liberty Jail for the death threat, which we're going over today. Because Liberty Jail, Joseph Smith was falsely accused. And let's see. Then both the men between whom the controversy is shall stand before the Lord, before the priests and the judges, which shall be in those days. And so, yeah, if it's not an actual thing you can take to court, like Nelson, having rigged the court systems here in Utah, it's stand before the Lord. So what is God's punishment for false accusers, or especially false accuser of Joseph Smith? The judges shall make diligent inquisition, and behold, if the witness be a false witness, and hath testified falsely against his brother. Here it is. Then shall ye do unto him as he had thought to have done unto his brother. So shalt thou put the evil away from among you. The beam and the mote I've summarized for you as that which you falsely accuse in another reveals the same and worse fault in yourself. That's how the judgment is decided, is that you're making a false accusation against somebody when you yourself are the one who's actually guilty. And so the punishment for that person that you're falsely accusing is now supposed to be your punishment. your punishment. It's a compromise, guys. No fan or no traffic. You have to decide. And there's nothing I can do about this visual. It self-adjusts, and I don't want it to. So, Joseph Smith gave a talk that Brigham Young refused to put in the Doctrine and Covenants. It's in the Joseph Smith papers. It's Part B for 19 July 1840. And so, yes, what have I been pushing? If you go down my video feed, you'll see a lot of it. And there's a reason why, Mormons. But Mormons fear it. They run and hide. They will not read the words of the man they claim is their founder. They'll sing praise to the man, but they will not read his words. Because Brigham Young didn't want it put in the Doctrine and Covenants. Now, why? Because somebody was a false accuser. So, talking in reference to the parable of the latter days that he gave in section 101, starting in verse 43, and specifically focusing here on verse 51. But before this, the time shall be, these who are now my friends. Remember, Brigham Young and his 12 are in the audience. Shall become my enemies, and shall seek to take my life. And there are those now before me. Remember, Brigham Young and his 12 are in the audience. Who will more furiously pursue me, more diligently seek my life, and be more bloodthirsty upon my track than ever were the Missouri mobbers? You say among yourselves, as did them of old time. Is it I? And is it I? Who's them of old time, Mormons? Refers to Mark chapter 14 specifically, because that's where the is it I comes from. It's the Last Supper, where Jesus says that only one would betray him. Joseph Smith used the plural pronoun. Those who will betray him and murder him. And so, yes, Joseph Smith prophesies that Brigham Young and his 12 would betray him and would murder him, having falsely accused him, and thus begin the great and abominable church, with Brigham Young as the false prophet. And so, what happened? Well, in 1838, there was that Utah War. There was the leadership crisis, as I call it, that came as a result of it. And yes, Joseph Smith was locked up in Liberty Jail. And so, let's go to that in section 121 and 122, which is where we'll read from. He's, bargaining with God, in denial for being locked up, talking about evil people. The ends of the earth shall inquire after thy name, and fools shall have thee in derision. Hell shall rage against thee, while the pure in heart, and the wise, and the noble, and the virtuous shall seek counsel, and authority, and blessings constantly from under thy head. If you're still in shock from me saying SOB, there's a reason why I did a less than 2-minute video in place of my review. I was pissed, furious. Rasband and then Nelson, oh, I was furious. And thy people shall never be turned against thee by the testimony of traitors, false accusers. And although their inheritance shall cast thee into trouble, influence shall cast thee into trouble, and into bars and walls thou shalt be had in honor. But for a small moment, and thy voice shall be more terrible in the midst of thine enemies than the fierce lion, because of thy righteousness, and thy God shall stand by thee forever and ever. And if thou art called to pass through tribulation, here's the death threat I got from Nelson last October conference. If thou art in perils among false brethren, if thou art in perils among robbers, if thou art in perils by land or by sea, if thou art accused with all manner of false accusations, if thine enemies fall upon thee, if they tear thee from the society of thy father and mother and brethren and sisters, if with a drawn sword thine enemies tear thee from the bosom of thy wife, and thine offspring, and thine elder son, although but 6 years of age, shall cling to thy garments and say, my father, why can't you stay with us? Oh, my father, what are the men going to do with you? If you've been watching the news in Ukraine, you've heard a lot of this. My father, why can't you stay with us? Oh, my father, what are the men going to do with you? And if then he shall be thrust from thee by the sword, and thou be dragged to prison, and thine enemies prowl around thee like wolves for the blood of the Lamb. There's that lamb again. Alrighty. So what then is God's judgment upon these men who falsely accused Joseph Smith? What was the punishment given to Joseph Smith for their false accusations of him? Well, 1, he died. 2, I've done the research. He died under a lunar eclipse. I revised the picture for you guys. Joseph Smith with 3 asterisks, is now assassinated. See Deuteronomy 19:16 through 19. And Joseph Smith, 19 July 1840. I should have put B. I didn't put B. Oopsie. But he died on June 27th, 1844, and there was a total lunar eclipse on May 31st, 1844. As I've noticed the pattern, as it is my research, anthropology of the ancient Middle East, I am aware of this. The instructors only told of stories about solar eclipses. And so, being Mormon, born and raised, I went, I wonder if that has anything to do with religious deaths as well. I'd always thought about it. And then Faust died, 2007. And, oh, look, a lunar eclipse. Oh, isn't that cool? Didn't realize that it had to do with God's displeasure of he who usurped Joseph's church with his murder and false accusation of Joseph Smith. And then Hinckley then goes and dies with a lunar eclipse. He died January 27th, 2008, and the lunar eclipse, the total lunar eclipse, February 21st, 2008. Hilarious. And so, yes, this lunar eclipse chart shows that God used lunar eclipses to identify the false accusers and have them punished with their deaths, but not assassination. This is God's judgment here. This can't be fixed and rigged, because it means that others, even John Taylor, would have had to assassinate Brigham Young. And others, like Wilford Woodruff, would have had to assassinate John Taylor. You see where we're going with this? And they would have had to have known about the eclipses in order to make sure that they fall within the time period required for God's judgment, in order to self-fulfill the prophecy. And though they may have known about Joseph Smith and timing it with a lunar eclipse, which was less than a month before, there's no way that all of them, down to Monson, which was the big event, could have all been assassinated. So Joseph Smith Sr., for example, or Joseph F. Smith Sr., for example, he died in the pandemic that was in 1918, November 19th, 1918. That was a sickness, creeping death from Moses, that took out Joseph F. Smith Sr. He was the kidnapped son of Hiram, who was born and raised instead by Heber C. Kimball. And even he falsely accused both his father and Joseph Smith. He had been fully turned to the dark side. That is a sad story. Makes me cry on that one. So what happened in 1838? Well, there was an election fraud. Danites secretly hiding within Joseph's church. In case you don't know, Joseph Smith himself knew of this. Now, in section 117, the church says that they decoded everything here, so everything is as it is. So the nouns are the actual nouns being referred to. They're not coded words, So in verse 8, for example, Adam on Diamond, on the plains of Olaha, Shinha, those are the actual names. Not coded still. They got it all. That's what they claim. And verse 11. Let my servant, Newell K. Whitney. Oh, okay, yeah, decoded. We know that guy. Be ashamed of the Nicolaitanian band and of all their secret abominations. So there was an actual named Nicolaitanian band. Don't look in the footnote to Revelation. It is there, right? 11, yep. Revelation chapter 2, verse 6. A 2,000-year-old secret order that Whitney was involved in. It's not code at all. And see, it still has Adam on Diamond, because that's the actual name. There is, yes. They named it that. But I'm not familiar with Olaha Shinha. Shinha, they say, was Kirtland, but they have Kirtland in verse 5. Let the properties of Kirtland be turned out for debts. And then there's Zion. That's Utah's Zion, right? Zion National Park. It's not code. Yeah, what is that? That's the Danites. Joseph Smith knew Newell K. Whitney was involved with the Danites. Okay, so when was this? Oh, look! July 8th, 1838. Right before everything hit the fan. And so Joseph Smith knew of the Danites, condemned the Danites, and condemned those who were participating with the Danites. In 1840, he comes out with 19 July. B exposes Brigham Young and his 12 of being the leaders of the Danites. Joseph Smith would go on in 1838 to give his Joseph Smith history. Let's see, only 1838. As they have transpired, or as they at present exist, being now 1838, the 8th year since the organization of said church. And then goes on to his birth. And it doesn't say above, it just says, oh, well, let's find out the actual date of when he started writing this. April 27th, 1838. That's when he began. And so, yes. He then goes on in July to tell Newell K. Whitney about the great and abominable church within the Church of the Lamb. And so, what goes on with the Joseph Smith history? Well, we have these two personages that are compared to the sun at noonday. What would that be in the language of the Egyptians? That would be Amen. Oh, Adam Andai Amen. Huh. That's strange. I thought it was Jesus. I thought Joseph Smith was Christian. Yeah, verse 19. Don't join Christianity. They're all wrong because of the creeds, which are an abomination. The great and abominable church, which has fallen. That's why there are thousands of different Christian churches. Just like feet of clay that have shattered. Christians will understand what I'm referring to in Daniel. But will Mormons? Yeah, I'm talking to the king of Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar. He has a dream. Daniel interprets it. Talks about him as gold. Persia, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then Constantine, and the clay feet that go. Yeah, first it was the Orthodoxy, and then the Protestant Reformation movement. That I think Luther was the one who started it all off, didn't he? So yeah, Christianity is shattered. You know, they still have people claiming that they're still united under Constantine's created God, who named him Jesus instead of Joseph of Genesis, or Moses of Exodus, or Samson from Judges, or Samuel from 1 Kings or 1 Samuel, depending on your version of the Bible, or other names of prophecy. He chose Jesus, turned the apocalyptic literature stories about a guy named Jesus, and it's unclear as to whether it's actually the Gospels now, or if it was the book of Jesus in the Old Testament that follows the 5 books of what's claimed to be Moses, even though Genesis is actually the book of Joseph. But you know, he chose the name, turned him into a real person and literal history, post-dating it back in the Roman period time. That's why it's called an abomination. And so the Jews then changed, when they did the Masoretic text, to translate Elohim as singular rather than plural, which would ruin the Bible, as Joseph Smith tells us. And then Islam with Muhammad, the Quran, yeah, they call Allah, it's translated into English as we. Huh. Well, that sounds like Constantine. Yeah, he made up a word and forced everybody to follow him. All of the different congregations with bishops did their own thing. They had their own apocalyptic literature. Some had Genesis, some had Exodus, some had other stories by Jesus, others by Samson, etc. And Constantine gathered them all together because the Roman Empire could not destroy them, and they were all fighting among themselves anyway. No, Joseph is the Christ. No, Moses is the Christ. No, Hercules is the Christ. No, Perseus. Those guys flew on flying horses from outer space, by the way. Revelation 19. the last day's wedding supper of the Lamb. Apocalyptic literature. And so they were told to unite, no longer be divided. And so they had to anathematize, or kick out of their club, the Aryan race, which was completely different. And it's completely different from the Aryans, India, from somewhere over in that area long before. So yeah, you gotta be careful not to redefine things. And he went and formed his own church, because that's what they were doing anyway. The bishops were all excommunicating people who opposed them and other bishops from other churches. Yeah, so? Well, I excommunicate you! They had their own congregations, and only those who believed in that bishop stuck with that bishop, and those who disapproved either went to another bishop or they started their own congregation, as the one who the Arian one did. Redid a version of Luke. And so, yeah, now they had to behave if they wanted money for their congregations. You know, an extortion threat. Make you an offer you can't refuse if you'll do me a favor, though. And Constantine was able to get them to agree on everything except for the Christ. They just refused to yield on that one. And so, yes, Constantine then chose Joseph. No, Jesus. And gave him a brand new created word that has no meaning, but it doesn't stop people from claiming they know the meaning. Even the Wikipedia page gives the meaning of it. No, there is no meaning. He made it up. It means not real person. That's what supernatural means. Not real person. It's a fantasy. And yeah, turned those stories into literal history. And that inspired the Masorite Jews to turn their apocalyptic literature into literal history and combine them together into a single strand narrative of a timeline. Oh, guys. So yeah, they really violated the Deuteronomic law not to touch the text. Leave it as is. But yeah, Constantine just utterly destroyed religion. And screwed it up for all of us today, 2,000 years later. And yes, afterwards, Constantine took a tour of Israel and goes, "Oh, that's where Jesus was born. Oh, there's the tomb. Oh, Golgotha. Mufasa." Yeah. Yeah, really screwed everybody up. So now everybody's looking for the second coming. So nobody knows the true Christ who's supposed to be coming, of which all the apocalyptic literature was prophesying about. Thus, abominable. And yet, 19 July 1840, Joseph Smith says, in like manner, there will come another. Yeah. And so, that Book of Mormon, Joseph Smith is told by Nephi that he's going to be given Egyptian gold plates, just like the Knights Templar of his daddy's Freemasonry, York Rites Masonry. Sure that's just a coincidence. I'm sure that if Lucy Mack, I'm sure somewhere in that her journal that she talks about that, she talked about how the tree of life of our husband's Congregationalist New Israelites that he had dreams with. We joined our son's church. The tree of life. Jewish mysticism. Wow. Must be true. I'm sure Daddy had nothing to do with replacing the 116 pages that Junior lost to make sure that things were done right. And and so, lest any of you think that this wasn't planned earlier, that Brigham Young just turned bad. He started off good. Remember, the new author who's changed Wikipedia on Brigham Young exposes him. He doesn't realize it. He thinks it's a good thing to attend church regularly and faithfully for 2 years before joining, when everyone else is joining right away. I want to be Mormon. Nope, Brigham Young did not join right away. He was attending church with his wife because she was sick. And they were hoping that she could be healed. They had priesthood blessings and all of this. They were taking the lessons, learning, etc. She never healed. And 2 years later, she dies. And then all of a sudden, Brigham Young immediately joins the church. Church is true. My wife is dead. Really? You're gonna stick with that one, huh? That's the story you think is faith promoting. Doesn't reveal some alternate purpose of revenge on the part of Joseph or Brigham Young. Well, somebody else joined with him. Heber Chase Kimball, who, according to Masonry in the Wikipedia section, says that when he was 22 years old, he became a master mason of his own lodge. Isn't that great? Victor Flats. Oh, it's red. Yeah. The place no longer exists. How coincidental. Ontario County, New York. Well, that was Scottish Rites territory back then. They stripped them. So that if you were in this strip of land, you're York Rites. In this next strip, Scottish Rites. Then York Rites, and Scottish Rites. There were rules before 1826 that had to be adhered to. After 1826, they were kind of desperate to take anybody who wanted to join. So the rules were tossed out. So today's Masonry is nothing like pre-1826 Masonry. And so Kimball is in Scottish Rites territory. And because of all the rules, there are many other problems. But he says in 1824 he went to Canandaigua, New York, to petition to become the York Rite 7th ranking of Royal Ark Masonry. It doesn't say 7th rank. You have to do your research on this guy. This guy likes to lie. But what's so important about Canandaigua, New York, and the lodge that's there in Canandaigua, New York? Who's the Master Mason of Canandaigua, New York? Why doesn't he name him? He says his petition was accepted, but claims that it was destroyed. He can't prove it because of the anti-Mason movement in 1826 that burned it down in 1827. So that's strange. Who is this York Rites Master Mason with Knights Templar as the highest rank? Yeah, it's already Joseph Smith Sr., which the church, after I did it, took it out of the opening paragraph on Joseph Smith Sr., and now you have to read down in to find, yeah. He was raised to the degree of Master Mason on May 7th, 1818 in Ontario Lodge number 23. Well, that's very specific. It's almost as if they had the records of Canandaigua, New York, and they have citation needed. Oh my God. They don't want you to know. Yeah, Heber C. Kimball is the enemy threat of the Nicolaitan band of Danites, who we learn through real church history, like John C. Bennett, who formed a Illuminati Halcyon order, that they came from the Illuminati through the Scottish Rites and formed the Danites under Joseph Smith in secret. But Joseph Smith was catching on. He knew. And even knew in the Book of Mormon. Yep, the formation of that great and abominable church. What would be the Christ name of that great and abominable church, people? Yep. And so, what's their symbol? Why does the church not show the doors close up of the Salt Lake Temple? Why won't they do it? Why won't they show us? Because even in conference, right before, they do the temple thing with the beautiful music. We see all the temples all over the world, and we see them very clearly, boldly, up close. And then the final one is the Salt Lake Temple, and they're behind a fence with all the bushes, and you have to look up. And I noticed that they used that clip in the motion picture when you hover over my video for when I went over that with you. In case you were wondering why I'm doing this. Yep. They're ashamed of their own religion. Their own Christ, whom they call Jesus. But Joseph Smith knew. Oh, look. April 26th, 1838. In Far West, Missouri. Oh, Joseph was in Far West? Yeah, he was still in Far West during that incident of the Utah War with the election scandal. I found the documents in the Joseph Smith papers. So listen carefully to the manner in which this is worded, and then listen carefully to Nelson he quoted this to justify the name. saying that Jesus is angry with nicknames. For thus shall my church be called in the last days, even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The abomination of Constantine, of the great and abominable. And Joseph is here saying, yeah, the church is going to be taken over by the great and abominable church. I will be murdered. And they will name it this. And I found it. Brigham Young had his notification to Europe, going on missions, sending out his 12. They named it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That wasn't changed. It was the Church of Christ. You'll see, unto my faithful servants who are of the high council of my church in Zion, for thus it shall be called. Church, my church in Zion. Thus it shall be called. So what is Joseph's original name of the church? The rise of the Church of Christ in these last days. Yep. 1834, the leaders of the church at the time gathered together, and Sidney Rigdon suggested that the name of the church be changed. So they had recommendations for the name change, and they voted on it, and it was unanimous. Church of Latter-day Saints. And so 115, there was no vote. Leaders didn't get together and say, we're changing the name again. We're now going to call it the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That was not official. That's how it's supposed to be done. Joseph Smith started it by saying we're going to call it the Church of Christ. But then in 1834, the leaders gathered together and said we want to change it. We had a vote, and it was a unanimous vote. In case you're not familiar with the need for a unanimous vote, I refer you to section 107, which is March 28th, 1835. Verse 27. And every decision made by either of these quorums must, by the unanimous voice of the same, that is, every member in each quorum must be agreed to its decisions in order to make their decisions of the same power or validity one with another. They voted, they were unanimous, name was changed. Church of Latter-day Saints. But where's Jesus? And so, yes, what Joseph Smith was doing in section 115 was not an official name change. It was not the process that he himself set up. He was prophesying. If I go another 3 hours, technically 2 because it'll take a long time to then upload and save. It'll be after the Mormons shift. You seeing what's going on here? And so 1838, Brigham Young, in the Joseph Smith papers, I found he had received revelation from Joseph that Brigham Young was to go be with his family. No longer do missionary work. He needs to go back and be with his family. And so Brigham Young now has plausible deniability as Joseph received revelation from God Is Jesus a Christian? And so the Danites, in a town that was a full day away, travel time from far west Missouri, or it was actually, hold on, yeah, it was Missouri, because they had to leave Missouri because of the extermination order. Yeah, we're good. That was Duchesne County, I think, where the city was holding the election in the one town. That was, as I used Google Maps to determine that it was too far for Joseph Smith, who has a record of doing things in far west Missouri. It was actually with Emma that he did a document thing with her on that day of the election. and so he was not there. The Danites were there. They all gathered in advance to overthrow the election results. And the town fought back, and people were threatened. And the sheriff and the judge were forced by the Danite mob to say in writing that Joseph Smith caused it. And then the extermination order. So do you see the context now of false brethren, traitors, falsely accused in Liberty Jail? Now, construction crew are now working. Yay! Isn't this so much better than having the fan? And so, yes, the Danites the whole time were purposely terrorizing the neighbors. They were doing it in secret, burning, looting, raping, murdering, all in secret, and led the people to believe Joseph Smith was ordering it. But it was Brigham Young and Heber C. Kimball. They were purposely trying to destroy the church from within. This is the Illuminati tactic, in case you didn't know. I learned about the Illuminati tactic before I found out the real church history. And so when I found out the real church history, I go, yeah, same exact pattern. They infiltrate, they become popular and well known, they rise up in authority, then they take over. And so 1838, the Danites rose up in the church too. Joseph Smith gets arrested, as Warren Porter Rockwell was ordered by Brigham and Heber rather than Joseph. And Brigham Young, with Joseph Smith out of the way, threatened through his Danites, because remember, he's got revelation from God to be with his family. The Danites then threatened Thomas B. Marsh. And Thomas B. Marsh left. Others, David Whitmer, threatened by the Danites, left. Oliver Cowdery, I did the video, as the history says that he was upset with Joseph buddying with Sidney Rigdon rather than him. And so in his anger and frustration accused Joseph Smith of having sex with his handmaid. Never seen it. He was just a fit of anger. made a false accusation. But there was something with that I still have yet to confirm. But nonetheless, same year. And others. Sidney Rigdon was clueless about the Danites, as he thought that the leaders were apostatizing from the church. And so he gives what's called the Salt Sermon, condemning the leaders for apostasy, and was clueless that it was the Danites that were uprising. And so with Thomas B. Marsh gone, section 107, verse 21, of necessity there are presidents or presiding officers growing out of or appointed of or from among those who are ordained to the several offices in the two priesthoods. And every decision must be unanimous. And so, William Smith, excommunicated by Brigham Young, booted out of the group. And others who may not unanimously vote for Brigham Young to become the president of their quorum. Yeah, we don't do that now that Brigham Young's in charge. That's not the process anymore. Huh. Strange. I never voted for the deacons or the teachers, presidents. I think even in priests, even though the bishop is in charge, I think there was still, well, we had the priest quorum advisor, something like that. And I can't remember if one of the priests, I think there was, but it's been 50 billion years ago, as to whether or not there was a boy among us who was chosen to be such. I think in deacon's quorum, I was asked to be a secretary, and I never did anything. I took notes in class. I don't think that lasted very long. We're kids, not adults. But nonetheless. Yeah. And so the remainder who were loyal to Brigham unanimously voted for Brigham Young to be the president of the Quorum of the 12. And yes, Brigham Young excommunicated. Not this high council that Joseph talks of. What is that high council of Zion? Is that the stake high councils that have no real authority? Because the 12, they've got the keys of Peter to rule the church and the kingdom. They don't need the keys of Moses. It's just, how can we be so fooled? When we read, it's like, wait a minute, that's not the way we do things. And we don't think. 19 July 1840, B. And so, they were falsely accusing Joseph this whole time. They were committing the crimes, and the people were thinking it was Joseph. They let them believe it. Joseph Smith was getting falsely accused all over the place, and getting locked up, and eventually was murdered by Willard Richards and John Taylor of the 12, fulfilling his prophecy. 19 July 1840, B. And so, there's some important things to know about the significance of dating. Not female-male dating, Star dating. Because, like I instructed at the beginning, God uses lunar eclipses for the deaths of the presidents of the church from Brigham Young. But there's more. Because Brigham Young usurped Joseph's church and became the president, exalting himself with authority he did not have, with the proper process not followed. Verse 22, supposed to be 3 presidents to succeed Joseph, and they're supposed to be voted on by the whole Melchizedek priesthood. It's going to be a little tough for a majority vote or unanimous vote. They'll have to settle for a majority vote. Our conclave is going to be very, very long. Maybe the top 3 becomes the presidents. We don't know. Nobody ever attempted to follow it. Brigham Young just assumed the role as others assumed the role, and everybody went their way. And John C. Bennett went with James Strang to start polygamy in his Illuminati Halcyon order because the Danites wouldn't take him in. He was going to ruin their plans. As they were practicing polygamy in secret and blaming Joseph for it, falsely accusing him. And so the great and abominable church in the Book of Mormon, what does it do? It takes away the plain and precious parts of the scriptures. What was taken out from the Doctrine and Covenants by Brigham Young in 1876, the year before he died. The chapter on marriage, monogamous marriage. Mono means one. Monogamous marriage. Condemning polygamy. 1835. It's in the Joseph Smith Papers, guys. It's all right there for you to study. You know, Elder Cook approved of you going to the Joseph Smith Papers and looking for yourself. I told you in my review, fact check them. How many of you have followed the counsel of the living prophets and gone to the Joseph Smith Papers? 19 July 1840 B, and even 17 March 1842, and include the minutes, because they do a vote and it's unanimous. They name their organization, Relief Society, and vote for Emma to be the president. Joseph Smith gave them priesthood, Melchizedek priesthood, to bless, to lay hands upon people, and said you can even structure your offices to include Aaronic priesthood, like deacons and teachers. He let them do whatever they want, to design it however they wanted. And then there's Oakes. It is not in God's program that women should hold the priesthood and priesthood office. And he's next in line. And you don't see the problem with that? And so Thomas B. Marsh gets a letter from Brigham Young saying, you must appear before us on the 17th of March, 1839. Joseph Smith is still in Liberty Jail. He was not excommunicated for his wife's milk strippings. Joseph did not excommunicate him. I did the video. But the date, 17 March, is significant. Because that's when Brigham Young officially usurped the presidency of the 12 and was claiming to be the leader of the church with Joseph Smith in Liberty Jail. He was now declaring himself, with the keys of Peter, the keys of Moses. The man like Moses, but he's the usurper. 17 March. So yes, Relief Society. What do women do that men don't? They give birth to the man like Moses. And when were they given priesthood and priesthood office? 17 March. But wait, there's more. Because I've already covered all this with the video of his birthday. On the homepage, Mormon Man Like Moses playlist. I made it easier for you guys to find. The lessons, I still haven't done it, and I've got too many of them now. It'll take time to make that into a playlist and make it available on the homepage. But we're supposed to have an Exodus sometime soon. The question is, are we, or will I be dead, or what's going to happen? So, there's something fascinating with the Book of Mormon. In the first year of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, Lehi leaves Jerusalem. He gets a Book of Mormon, talks about the end of the world for the Jews by Babylon. Just like Joseph Smith gets Egyptian gold plates from Nephi about the end of the world in the Book of Mormon, about the end of the world with the Babylon, but quotes biblical prophecy of the latter days to come in the future. Talks about that man like Moses being the Christ. Strange. What's going on here in the Book of Mormon? Is this apocalyptic literature too? Well, sure enough, we see the sun at noonday. Amen. But he calls him Jesus throughout the book. And so we get the next thing in 2 Nephi chapter 25. And talking about a Messiah, and a Messiah, and Messiah, and his name shall be Jesus Christ, Son of God. What? That's not the learning of the Jews. That's the great and abominable church's Christ. Save it be a false Messiah, who should come and deceive the people. For there is save one Messiah spoken of by the prophets, who were Messiahs themselves. That the Messiah is he who should be rejected by the Jews? No, they're the ones who are looking for him. They haven't rejected him. What's going on? Is it another group of people that are coded? Do we need to decode this like the Nicolaitan band? Yes. Yes, we do. So verse 19. For according to the words of the prophets, I just did that video this morning. The Messiah cometh 600 years from the time my father left Jerusalem. This is going to blow your mind, and you will be rewarded for enduring to the end of this video. It's 4 CE, like I went over in the other video this morning. But it's the death sign, a solar eclipse. This is going to blow your mind. And so, if that's the death of Christ during the Roman period time, because remember, the Book of Mormon is the only one that reveals this as the date. And so he then, therefore, would be born 33 years earlier, even though they say he's going to be born in 4 CE, but that's the death date. So 33 years previous is 29 BCE. There's no 0 year. And so BCE, 29 BCE, is the Hebrew year 3732. As Av is the 30th of July. Yeah, interesting. But anyway, guess when 17th of March is? It's the day that starts off Purim in the evening. This is awesome. And it is in Adar 13th. For the Knights Templar on Friday the 13th. But it's on a Wednesday. But still hilarious. It is just awesome. And if you aren't familiar with Purim, that's the book of Esther, where the bad man working for the Persian king makes a weapon and he's going to use it to murder the Jews. And so Esther goes and tells the king, hey, I'm a Jew, I'm going to be murdered with this weapon. And so the king then says, okay, well, I don't want Esther to die. She's my replacement wife. I had to get rid of the first wife because she wouldn't dance naked in front of my buddies. And so I like Esther. I want her to stay. And she saves the Jews. And so that which you falsely accuse and set aside a punishment for the falsely accused becomes the weapon that is used to take out the false accuser. Deuteronomy 19, Beam and Moat, etc. And so, if the Smiths did not know this, wow. But as they, Joseph Smith Sr. had to rewrite the Book of Mormon, 116 pages, it's him who put that in. So, yeah, I think they knew. And it's also known with St. Patrick, 17th, which is his death day for the birthday. And that comes from the tales of the British Druids who told the tale of St. Patrick, because the snakes were already long gone, and so they were purposely making apocalyptic literature out of St. Patrick, and thus they knew the date as well. Apparently everybody knows this date, and yet John in Revelation talks about Isaiah as if it's 23 September 2017. This is so deeply encoded. This is just intense. And so, you have to go to -28, which is 29 BCE, because there's no 0 here. And for the 17th of March, you see Jupiter right in his position where he will be on 8 April 2024. The last days of the latter days. The last day of the latter days. From John in his Revelation, chapter 19. And Mercury is also there. That's the messenger of the gods making the announcement. And Venus is there with the sun in Pisces, his birth sign. Notice how Jesus is doing the Last Supper with the people and has 2 fishes and 5 loaves. Well, the 5 loaves is Spica, the Star of Bethlehem, house of bread. And oh, somebody's in her womb, the moon. Now the Egyptians, language of the Egyptians, has the eyes of Horus, representing the word PTR, no vowels, so Peter, which means seer. Huh. Joseph Smith says that too. Interesting. And the church would not let me have it put in the footnotes for you. And so the right eye of Horus, the one who's to restore the throne of his father, the man like Moses who is to restore Joseph Smith's church from the great and abominable church. Right eye is for government and is the sun. Left eye is for religion and is the moon. I've showed you guys that picture. Showed it to you yesterday. Yeah, even in the Bruce R. McConkie one that nobody cares about. That was the biggest discovery ever. Dude, guys, he's there testifying of the false Christ. And God was pissed. It was both solar and lunar. Oh my God. And so, yeah. And the moon is there with falling stars, falling from heaven. The inverted pentagram of Lucifer. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? Thou desired to exalt thyself to the heavens as the leader of the church, claiming the keys of Peter rather than Moses. Brigham Young. That's his symbol too. And so, yes, in the belly of the woman, for the birth of the Jesus, which that would be interesting to know, because Herod the Great died in 7 BCE, and so there's confusion among people about that. But Herod the Great. Okay, yeah. He reigned from 37 to 4 BCE. But that's sure. Filma says 1 BC. You guys are putting in your biases. It was 7 BCE. Why am I not seeing 7 BCE? 4 or 7, huh? Maybe I was thinking of something else. death. Okay, they only have 4, 5, 1, or 1 CE. And you can tell which one is biased, but yeah, okay, so 4 CE, not 7. So yeah, plenty of time before he dies. But if he dies in because there's some other problems if you're going to consider this history, because I'm trying to remember when they made it a law for Jews to go into military service at 18. When did the Romans force Jews into military service at 18 years old? 6 to 130 CE. Okay. So, yeah, he would have been... No, military forces in Judea. That's not the question. That's wrong. Christians in the Royal Army. The First Jewish-Roman War began. Jews were an example exempted from military service. Contrary to what Josephus wants his readers to believe, the Jews did not have the status of religio licita, permitted religion, religious exemption, as the status did not exist in the Roman Empire, nor were the Roman decrees concerning the Jews positive. Some Jews volunteered for Roman service. So where was I getting this from? The Roman army were descended from the bodyguard of Accusers. This is going to take me too long to find, apparently. So I'll have to do this on my own time. We know of many Jews who had Roman citizenship. Herod, Paul, Josephus are only the most famous examples. Military were altered during the empire. Yeah, it's going to take me too long to find it. So very interesting. Mars is being flooded by the Red Sea with the Exodus. If you saw that video. Alright, so the next one is 1839, the excommunication of Thomas B. Marsh by Brigham Young. Mars is now the crown of the church. Jupiter, that is Jupiter, right? Yeah, that's Jupiter. Is at Spica. God is telling us with the sign in the heavens that Brigham Young has usurped the church, but there is prophesied a man who will come through Brigham's church to restore it. And so then you see the moon is there in Pisces. You see, is that Venus? No, Venus is with the... Oh, yeah, Venus. The moon is on one tail of Pisces, Venus is on the other, and Mercury is there in conjunction on the back of the flying horse. Yep. The messenger is talking about the latter days prophecy, where the sun will be eclipsed and the restoration takes place. 2 more years. Fascinating. And so then on 1842's March 17th, you have the moon in Taurus. Mars is there in the birth of a man like Moses. Refer to that video. I should have the sign in the heavens for you of his birthday. And Jupiter and his father Saturn are on the flying horse, who's half human. See that? Sun, yes, still on the back of the horse. Because this time into 8 April in 2024, Sun is on the back of the horse. And is now with Venus. The women are empowered with priesthood authority on the back of the horse, where Jupiter is on the back of the horse with his father, Father Amen and Son Amen, first vision, on the back of the horse. This is the judgment prophecy, as Mars has usurped that role. It was Brigham Young back then, the god of war. And he's taken over the birthright blessing of March 17th to come in the future. All of these testifying of the date. And the majority of them, because only St. Patrick is for March 17th, with the sun god English druids. But yes, Amen, sun god, noonday. The English druids were sun gods. That was their name. They were priests of the sun god. I'm talking about the future sun god, who would come from their loins, seed of the British druids who developed the prophecy in the first place, because his name shall be Sun God, Emmanuel. So, just fascinating how the Smiths knew all this, because Joseph Smith was setting this part up. Senior died in 1840, and so Joseph Smith was now taken over, and that's why he rushed to get Master Mason of the Scottish Rites. Because old school, before 1826, you cannot be apart with another family member. And his family is York Rites, but nonetheless, things are changed after that, and the Grand Master from Warsaw understood and recognized Joseph Smith as the leader of the church, and the majority that Heber and Brigham Young talked about came from the Scottish Rites, which was why they went to him to make it happen. And so Joseph Smith was consecutively made Master Mason, as Heber C. Kimball claims 1 year he was a Master Mason. And so Joseph Smith, on the 15th of March, he was now a Master Mason. All in that immediate time frame. The Warsaw Lodge members were pissed, because many of them were from the old school, and didn't understand why they weren't appointed to be a Master Mason over the Nauvoo Lodge. Why not one of them? And so that angered them and turned them against the church, and they would eventually override the Nauvoo Lodge, as Brigham Young was. They were bringing in everybody of the Scottish Rites. So the Warsaw Lodge didn't know who they were at this point, because once the Illuminati get caught with their destructions and violence and crimes, they scatter. There may be some who get locked up, but they scatter when they get exposed, and they go and infiltrate another group and do the exact same thing. Become popular, rise up into popularity and activity, and then eventually take over offices, and then take over the whole organization. You see that with Amlici, who leaves the Nephites, betrays them, joins the Lamanites, and works his way up the chain of command to become the leader of the whole Lamanites. He does coup after coup after coup, assassinating his way up to the top. Fascinating. So yes, April 2024, that's when Jupiter is at the hind legs, like his 33 birth sign. And the birth sign, as actual birth sign, you need to pay attention to that. But there you have it. This is how God not only prophesied it in Scripture that this would happen, he has signs in the heavens in place to show that it happened, and the Smiths knew extra stuff and let us as Mormons get exclusive information about it, because it is our Mormon Christ. It's not the Christ of Christians or the Allah of Islam or even of the Jews. This is only for the Mormon Church, the Church of the Lamb. I'm sure it's real. It's not coded. So, for those few of you who have stayed with me after conference, there you go.